You know, we could have given out a $1 million grant. Well, if you look at the $1 million per job, we could have given out a $1 million grant to 1,000 small, locally owned businesses. Do you know any small businesses that could grow and create jobs with that kind of resources?
All of them?
So anyway, you know, it's a different type of strategy, a different type of approach. There's obviously lots of opportunities to grow green businesses and the like as well. So we manage a community-based revolving loan fund. People like you and I, faith-based groups, banks, credit unions, others invest in our organization. We pool that money together, reloan it for community and economic development purposes. We finance affordable housing, we finance small businesses, and we do a lot of for-profit and not-for-profit creative things to generate community economic development. So yeah, I think countywide there's a lot of opportunities. Some solutions. So our organization, we've been around for 25 years. You know, I'm here more as much on a personal level as I am representing the Community Loan Fund. But our organization does serve Saratoga County. We serve 11 counties in the capital region. We go up to Saratoga and Warren, Washington counties. So there are opportunities to bring more resources from our organization to your community to try to make some of these things happen. But I mainly want to talk about two things. One is a community land trust. Most of you are probably familiar with those, probably more in an environmental sense, but there's a growing list of community land trusts across the country and across the globe of groups that purchase land and either develop housing or renovate housing or provide other kinds of economic opportunities on community-owned land. So it's a great way to balance these things that we're talking about in terms of giving the community more control over land, which is obviously a major resource and a major issue in Saratoga County, but also providing people, low-income people in particular, with the opportunities to own their own housing on community-owned land, to have community-supported agriculture on community-owned land, to have small business, whatever you want. The model is flexible enough to use for all those things. But in terms of housing affordability, the community land trust model is meant to create permanently affordable housing. So if subsidies are going into that housing to create that housing, in theory, it's preserved in perpetuity. So that subsidies captured. If people want to sell their home, for example, they have to sell it at a limited purchase option price, and it allows the community to keep that housing affordable in perpetuity. So it gives people the opportunity to own their own homes, or rent affordably, but it also gives the community the interest in making sure that housing is kept affordable and that there's a growing stock of affordable housing. So we're not just financing a unit here, a unit there, and it's affordable for 5 years or 10 years, and then it's lost. It's an attempt at a long-term solution. And there's plenty of resources out there. If anybody wants to check it out, so there's a group called the Institute for Community Economics, which is now managed by the National Housing Trust. Their website is nhtinc.org. You can learn a lot about community land trust there. There's another group called Equity Trust, which is equitytrust.org. There's a gentleman named John Davis of Burlington Associates, which is burlingtonassociates.com. And you can learn a lot about community land trust. I think it has a lot of potential for in Saratoga County. And I know there's people who've talked about it over the years and maybe have had some real initial meetings, but it's never really generated any legs. And again, I think that's why I'm laying this out for all of you, because I think you may be able to carry it. You got a question?
Just when you said about affordable housing, there's a group in Saratoga that is doing the affordable housing over on Allen Street?
Is that the Housing Authority spin-off?
Yes.
Sure. Yeah, no, there's lots of good things happening.
I mean, I know, we're just saying that there are some groups, that are...
Oh, absolutely. Shelters of Saratoga, Transitional Services Association. I know there's tons of them. But it's not a commitment to permanently affordable housing, and there's still no overall regional, countywide plan in terms of where we're headed.
See, I kind of disagree with that.
Okay.
Sorry, it's just
Good.
with, because there has been funding going into that towards affordable housing for a long time through the city. It's been for about, I don't know, the last 5 years.
You're talking about the housing trust, the city's housing trust fund, which I was going to talk about
Okay.
next, but that's all right.
Okay, go ahead. That's why I was just going to say that this, I know that this Saratoga Springs at least has been working on that for quite some time.
Well, I know Brad's not here, and he cringes every time I say it. I don't know if anybody else is here, but that's not a real housing trust fund. The housing trust fund is supposed to have permanently dedicated sources of revenue. So those are one-time appropriations, which are great and can be used, but to my knowledge anyway, the city has not permanently committed resources to affordable housing. They have.
It is on CDBG that we, for the last 5 years, have committed.
Right, but it's not a dedicated source of revenue. You review that each year and decide, right? Okay, well, anyway, we'll just go around in circles there. So I did want to talk about housing trust funds, and in Vermont, there's a particularly interesting model that I think it's a housing and conservation trust fund. So housing trust funds receive permanent, dedicated sources of revenue to support the preservation and production of affordable housing, and it demonstrates a long-term public commitment to affordable housing. There's over 600 of them now across the country, city level, county level, state level. There's a group called the Center for Community Change. It's called communitychange.org. Mary Brooks, who's been advising people for years on how to create housing trust funds, if you want to learn more about that. I think there's a particularly interesting model in Vermont. It's called the Vermont Housing and Conservation Trust Fund, which blends the interests of affordable housing and the preservation of open space. It's their website is just their acronym. I think it's called the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, so it's vhcb.org. And there's all kinds of different revenue sources that can go into housing trust funds, and I have a list of sources if anybody wants to talk about those. But it's very interesting. Again, it's a financing tool that can blend a lot of things I just talked about, getting people together to plan and balance the needs and interests of preserving housing affordability, preserving open space, and some of the other things. So I'll leave that there, and if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
I'm interested in that community loan fund or the program. What's your default? What percentage of the people you lend to default?
We've made over $26 million in loans now, and we have a loan loss rate of less than 1.5%. And we have a 100% repayment rate to all of our socially concerned investors. We've made over 540 community and economic development loans now.
Great.
So that's...
I was interested in knowing a little bit more about that report you mentioned earlier from Austin, because we're kind of a sister city to Austin with this tech development. Well, at least the highlight of, or the major problems that they came across.
Right. I think it's on the website. I think it's called High Tech Growth and Lessons Learned or something like that. And the lessons that I took from it were that housing affordability issues became more of a regretted not working with nonprofit groups more in terms of getting involved in planning and setting the agenda for the region. And that disparities in terms of race and income became a bigger and bigger issue.
There's a good movie about that called The Unforeseen. It's all about Austin, Texas, and how they developed over the last 20 years. Oh, really? It's here in the library.
If a committee was going to work on one specific goal for next year along these lines, what would it be?
Well, the community loan fund already exists, so obviously that, we don't need to recreate the wheel. So I would think, I can't, do you want to focus on trying to generate revenue sources to support all this stuff? I mean, I'm intrigued by the Housing and Conservation Trust Fund model. I think there's a lot of, again, the green infrastructure, the county's already committed to that to a certain extent. a lot of people interested in housing affordability issues. It brings people together, it forces planning, it thinks people think regionally. I still think the county needs a community land trust for housing issues, but I guess I would go with the housing and conservation trust concept, at least explain. Gotcha.
I think I know this one. What happens statewide with Peter's organization is for nonprofits to get together and do something because, frankly, the government did not do anything for many years in terms of sustainability, in terms of smart growth and stuff like that. I think the same thing is true for affordable housing in Sarasota County in particular. Look, all the organizations have been very, in the trenches, working very hard, but can't work, have never worked together and do. I'm aware of a recent effort to try to develop a countywide plan, which you're aware of, you're on the committee, a countywide plan and to try to get a county trust fund going, affordable housing trust fund going, and to promote various smart growth policies that relate to affordable housing. I think working nonprofits together is a very crucial step, an unfortunate step that has to happen in lack of government leadership.
Question. When you say trust fund, are you talking about a dedicated pool of money that spins off interest that's then used to purchase affordable housing? I don't understand what trust fund.
No, I mean, some of there's dozens of potential revenue sources from, most of them tend to revolve around real estate because the mortgage tax, adding, I think some affordable or open space things, other things have been, adding 1/8 of a percent to a mortgage recording tax or a real estate transfer fee. That revenue gets dedicated to go into supporting affordable housing or preservation of open space. So there's lots of models out there and lots of potential revenue sources, and it varies from community to community. That's where people like you got to decide what makes the most sense and what to push.
I think when a lot of people talk about Saratoga County, they look at sort of, Saratoga Springs, the city, and then you have the suburban areas around Saratoga. But even within the city, you can look at it almost as the city as a microcosm of the county. You have the urban inner district of Saratoga Springs, and you have a fairly rural suburban outer district. So I think one of the things that I think would really help in the discussion of Saratoga Springs is to not ignore the fact that we still have suburban areas. Everybody comes to visit Saratoga and looks at the beautiful downtown and says, "Oh, this is a great, urban renewal. We have a great downtown." Then they ignore Geyser Crest. They ignore the Loughbury Lake area. They ignore the Saratoga Lake area. These places where we are allowing subdivisions to go in what we define as our green belt. So I think it kind of comes back to what you're talking about, combining these low-income or affordable housing issues with our green space. When you look at it, look at Allen Drive, you look at some of those low-income affordable housing units, they're not going into the inner district. They're going into what is supposed to be a preserved green space. I see an issue with that. We're trying to preserve the green space, and yet anytime we're looking into an affordable housing, somehow it becomes the only place where we can do it, which I think is ridiculous and really counterproductive. I'd like any of your thoughts on that sort of issue.
Well, I guess that's why in some ways I look at it more like a countywide basis. I mean, I've heard solutions like, we put low-income people out in Schuylerville and we bus them in, or why can't we rehab existing housing, which is an economic engine itself. It puts people